All right, what is going on there, fellas? I figured we could do a bit more of a chill, laid back video for the day. It's going to end up being pretty long, so I hope you guys can put this on in the background while you're eating your meals, while you're prepping your meals, because that is exactly when I like to casually intake some lifting content. I hope my videos can fill that role for you guys. Not too serious. I'm going to try to fit in as much practical knowledge as I can, but just know this video is going to be largely for fun and less of a pure educational resource. So bear with me. I figured we would do the video I promised months and months and months ago, where we do a bulking foods tier list. We're going to talk about how I rate different things in terms of their utility within a bulking diet. As a guy who started out his lifting career weighing about 145 pounds, and I'm currently up to 260 pounds. The appetite has never really matched the metabolism. It's always been hard for me to eat enough food, so I've done a lot of trial and error over the years. At different points, I've tried different things, gained traction. I've tried things and they've gone badly. So hopefully, I can give you guys some of that information so you don't have to go through the same trials that I did. Now, this video isn't just going to be a this tastes good, this tastes bad, because I think a lot of people do go wrong in their approach to bulking and just use it as an excuse to eat a bunch of garbage. There's a lot of flaws with this approach. One is that we're probably going to likely get into too much of a caloric surplus to where we're going to gain weight at such a rate that a big percentage of it is going to be body fat. Our health is going to get poor, our conditioning is going to get poor, our training will suffer, and inevitably we're going to have to do this big, long, prolonged cut to get off all this excess body fat that we put on. Presumably we'll lose some of the muscle we put on coming back down in this really long caloric deficit that we made ourselves do, whereas we've been in a better spot had we put on weight a little bit slower, kept the body fat in check, kept the work capacity high so our training quality could stay high, and made it so that bulking did not have to be synonymous with our health getting worse. I see lots of guys casually in the YouTube comments being like, oh, I'm so good at bulking. God, bulking is so easy. What is your problem, Sam? What do you mean you struggle to gain weight? I could put on 50 pounds like that. Well, the way I like to approach bulking is to try to churn through as much clean food as we can in a day. We're going to be hitting our macros. Presumably our digestion is going to stay relatively good, meaning we're going to be able to digest and presumably assimilate the food a little bit more. We don't have this chronic stress going on with poor digestion, leading our whole body to be in this constantly inflamed state that kind of can negatively affect our training. Because we're eating clean foods rather than just getting our calories by whatever means necessary, we have this greater quantity of micronutrients for our body to work with. So we've got this greater number of building blocks of micros alongside a quality set of macros, keeping our digestion intact. And we can learn how to be in a caloric surplus without that meaning our health gradually getting worse. And it also tends to be pretty easy to keep the body fat in check this way, feeling good, and the performance just chipping away in the gym as our weight slowly climbs up. That being said, I know some of you guys are young. You kind of don't have the cooking facilities in place, or your metabolism way outruns your appetite and you haven't built up that ability to eat through a lot of clean food yet. I'm not entirely opposed to the occasional use of these high caloric density foods. I just don't think it should be really a daily crutch within our efforts to bulk. But I will give you some of my anecdotes from back in college when I was having a really hard time with managing my calories, what I thought were good strategies and what I thought were bad strategies in terms of getting in some high caloric density foods. So massive 4-minute intro done. Those are kind of my constraints. This isn't just a get fat kind of thing. This is actually my experience for what's been really helpful for keeping myself in that small caloric surplus over a prolonged period of time to be conducive to gaining muscle while keeping the digestion in track, while keeping the body fat relatively low, while keeping healthy and making sure that our training only benefits and doesn't suffer. And how I like to try to get through as much clean food as I can and how I feel it benefits my training. The first one we have here is yogurt. Yogurt's going to be hit or miss because a massive percentage of the world is lactose intolerant. You guys already know that. I don't have to tell you that. Although it is worth mentioning that lactose intolerance is a spectrum. The amount of lactase that people make isn't just yes or no. There's different quantities. So something like Greek or Icelandic yogurt, because it's already been kind of broken down a little bit, the amount of lactase present in these yogurts is actually less than is present in milk. So some of you might not be able to drink a glass of milk without feeling like shit, but you may be able to have yogurt. I usually wouldn't eat a meal where all of the protein is coming from yogurt, but it can be a way if you have a meal where you're like, my protein's a little bit low. You can have a little bit of yogurt on the side to supplement up that protein. So it's kind of a side thing that's very easy to eat. So you fill up on more solid foods. You can throw this on the side and get it down even when you're pretty full. It has great potassium content, calcium content, bunch of great micronutrients, has pre and probiotic qualities, but it's going to be really hit or miss from person to person. So I would put that B tier. I would say if you digest it well, you can make a solid argument for bumping that up to A or S tier, considering it's going to potentially have a positive impact on your digestion. It's very easy to eat once you're already full, and it's very micronutrient dense. Great source of potassium in particular, aside from obviously dairy being a great way to source your calcium. Now the next one, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or peanut butter and honey sandwiches. This doesn't fit the criteria of like the optimal diet that lots of the things we're going to put in the high tier are going to hit. But I do find that if you're a young man who's got a busy schedule, maybe you're working, maybe you're in college, and your appetite is nowhere near what you burned. You just struggle to be in a caloric surplus. You haven't really settled down in enough consistency in your life that you're meal prepping every single day at the same time. I find a lot of the way that we need to gain weight is to find little windows where we're not eating and find extremely convenient habits to fit calories in there. So you have this gap between classes where you're not normally eating, you can't make it to the meal hall. Well, if you packed yourself some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, at least we can get some food into that time on a daily basis, really consistently, really conveniently. It can be a way to kind of fit in these consistent calories. We're going to talk about fruit juice later and how this is kind of one of those things where, maybe this is a slight step away from optimal, but it can be a way for someone who's really struggling to fit enough food into their day to fill a time gap that would be otherwise wasted. So I think we can probably put these just below the yogurt. I honestly think it's pretty valid. Now, this burger we have here is meant to indicate a homemade burger rather than going out and getting a burger. The reason I specify that is generally just the way they're cooked. You can select a relatively lean ground meat. You can make it yourself on a grill. It's really easy. If you've never done it, I recommend you learn because I am no cook myself and I can easily make some decent burgers. So it's a great skill to have. It's a great way to break up the monotony of eating a lot of ground beef and steak. You can trick yourself into thinking this is a totally different meal when it's really just a way to make something that you might be eating in your bulking diet really palatable. We know we can cook it on a grill. It doesn't have to be covered in let's say vegetable oils, which might have upset our stomach if we went to go eat out. So I would say that a homemade burger is a A-tier bulking item because it's not very far off what we would be eating anyway, but we can trick ourselves into making it really, really easy to eat. We're like, I'm eating burgers. That's easy. The same amount of meat in a burger or two is nothing. But once we've been eating, rice and beef all day, rice and chicken all day, it can feel like a bit of a chore. Whereas a burger is a good way to get in some macro-friendly stuff, get in some lean beef. We can add no extra fat on top of it, make it relatively macro-friendly, all without kind of really deviating from a good plan. I think that's a great tool. And as far as like quote unquote like clean cheat meals, meaning a way to get in a mental break from however rigorous your diet is, hopefully without wrecking your digestion, homemade burgers are the shit. And there's a reason you see lots of bodybuilders lean into using those. Next one. Whole eggs, S tier. I mean, I've probably, if you found my channel, you've already been told this is great. They contain choline. They contain a crazy amount of a wide variety of micronutrients. Good fat source, good very high quality protein source. I mean, egg whites are as high a quality protein source as you're going to find. Great option overall. If you like them, they don't upset your stomach, I would highly recommend. And I do find that some people, egg whites will upset their stomach, but if you include some yolks with it, the cofactors within the yolk actually make it digest better, so that's worth a try. I'm not going to beat this one to death. You guys have probably already heard this. There's lots of great reasons to be including whole eggs in at least one of your meals per day in your bulking time. Now the next one we have is honey. I forgot to mention at the beginning of this video, all of these items were just selected from the ones that you guys suggested to me. So I didn't pick any of these. I just picked them from the community post I put up many moons ago. So honey. It can go on the peanut butter and honey sandwich. You can throw it into a shake and mix it in there if you don't mind the taste. It can be just a way to sneak in calories. So in a lot of ways, I would say that honey can be used in a couple different meals, whether it be your oats, whether it be something else, to just sneak in some calories that you wouldn't otherwise be getting. It's great in a post-workout window just for extra carbohydrate uptake, because my understanding is that carbohydrates, the different ones, break down via different pathways. So if we have two different carbohydrate sources, because they are breaking down in separate pathways, our uptake of carbohydrates could actually be twice as fast. If I recall, that is why Stan Efferding, as well as a lot of like UFC nutritionists, are fans of, I believe it is orange juice and dextrose post-workout, just two separate sugar pathways that we can uptake at twice the rate. Who cares? I believe honey contains two. I could be wrong there. Could just be a way to fit in calories. Nothing magic there. Not going to be like a huge amount of our carbs per day, but it's a valid option. Now, sugar cereal in general. The problem with sugar cereal meals is it's kind of hard to source enough protein, because it's like, what are you going to drink? An insane amount of milk and just wreck your stomach, even if you are lactose tolerant? That's probably getting a whole meal's worth of calories from milk, probably not the move. I would say that lots of bodybuilders will mix up some milk in a protein powder and then put it on some sugar cereal as a post-workout, and I think that's perfectly valid. It breaks up the monotony of what I consider to be the staple like central foods to the bulking diet. Most of them are going to have that like salty and savory taste profile, so something we can get in to get towards our macros that's sweet could be a good option. Usually sugar cereal itself doesn't actually have too much issue digesting for people, so I feel like we could put that high C, low B. It's a valid option, especially if you like to have it with some milk and protein powder. If you like that meal, that's something you could absolutely utilize to your advantage to break up that monotony of flavor profiles. Now, one thing I didn't have in here because nobody suggested it, but reminds me of that, is cream of rice. You can imagine I have a little cream of rice thing over here. I would probably put that in the S tier. It's going to digest relatively easily, so we can eat our next meal again quickly. We can just mix protein powder into it to make it a macro-friendly meal. We could put almond butter, whey protein, and cream of rice. It's going to digest relatively quickly. We're good to eat again, which is going to be a big thing for getting in enough food. If you struggle to eat enough food and you're eating 3 meals per day, you're probably going about this the wrong way. I would rather you eat smaller meals that aren't just stuffing your face and do it more often. I tried to eat as much as I possibly could 2 to 3 times a day, and I came nowhere close to eating enough food because I'd be so bogged down I couldn't eat for hours. And I thought, well, but I'm eating as much as I can. That's how you bulk. And it wasn't until I tried to leave a little bit of force feeding in reserve and try to eat more often that I started to see a lot of success. So meal frequency is kind of a key, and things that you can turn around and eat another meal quickly. The great part about cream of rice is that it's just rice, which is going to be S tier, spoiler, but it lends itself to a completely different flavor profile than rice, which is very convenient. So S tier for cream of rice. Here we have blueberries. These are S tier in my opinion. Very, very high micronutrient density. I like including a little bit of fruit with each meal. The fructose has a positive stimulatory effect on the liver, so that's healthful for your liver. I find it's very good for energy levels to have these smaller servings of fruit spaced throughout the day. And again, we've eaten as much, let's just say, beef and rice as we possibly can. We couldn't eat another bite of that. We can throw down a handful of blueberries for some extra calories as well as some extra micronutrients. So it's something we can eat once we kind of hit that point of full on our main food to get in just a little bit of extra calories. So for many of people I've kind of suggested diets for, something like a handful of blueberries after 3 of the 4 meals is something that I will often include to run up some extra calories, get in those servings of fruits, get in a bunch of antioxidants among other micronutrients. Lots of good stuff there. S tier. Now this is pasta. Pasta is kind of hit or miss. People find it hyper palatable, which is going to be a big plus in a bulking diet. Lots of people find it causes them some amount of gastric distress, which is going to be a minus. Lots of people find that it sits like a brick in their stomach. So while they could eat a ton of it, they're not going to be able to turn around and eat another meal. But that being said, enough people have positive anecdotes about the pasta, just being that they can eat so much of it, that I don't think it's useless by any means, especially if it doesn't cause you a significant amount of gastric distress. You can get rice-based pasta, which would be probably up in the S tier. Again, just kind of breaking up the monotony of easy digesting rice, but we're going to say regular pasta, especially if you throw it in your last meal where you don't need to turn around and eat again quickly. You're using a sauce that doesn't wreck your stomach. I feel fine putting that in the C tier. It's something that you could lean into if you're having a really hard time. Wouldn't necessarily be an always thing for me, but I respect it if that's what you got to do. So next we have chocolate. We have milk chocolate, which would just be a way to get in some extra calories. Let's say we have a window in the day where we're going to go a while without eating, just based on our class schedule. Chocolate could be a way to fit some calories in there. Though I would probably recommend that you get some almonds or some dried fruit or something that's going to have some extra benefits on top of just the calories. So, I think that if we were just talking milk chocolate, that could be interchangeable with lots of other easy calories that probably could be better spent, but it's not useless if you're really struggling to get in your calories. Dark chocolate, on the other hand, we have antioxidants, we have magnesium in it, so there are some micronutrients. In some ways, it's kind of like the blueberries, where once we finish a meal, we could always just polish off a little bit for some extra calories, as well as some micronutrients. So milk chocolate would probably be C, D tier. We'll put dark chocolate B tier, just because it is very easy to eat. It does have some extra micronutrients on top of the fact that we're getting some extra calories to top off a meal, which is kind of a little slot in the diet that we could take advantage of, as you're going to hear me mention quite a few times throughout this. Now, the next one, avocado, an added fat source. So presumably you're having a meal with a lean protein. We have a carbohydrate source, and because the protein is so lean, to hit our macros, let's say we're just distributing our fat evenly across 4 to 5 meals. We're like, okay, we're coming up shy of that amount of fat. What do I do to add in some fat? Avocado is very tasty. That's a plus. It tends to be a very healthful fat. There's lots of good arguments for it. It can make a meal taste very different and very easy to eat. It's a great way to add fat to a meal if the protein is lean enough that it needs to be. So generally, red meat meals or egg meals, I will not be adding an additional fat source. Chicken and white fish, I will. And avocado is absolutely one that I could utilize. We don't want to be eating so much avocado that our diet becomes high in fat. Usually when guys are looking to bulk, I recommend a moderate protein, high carb, and lower end fat. Obviously, there's a certain amount of fat we need for hormonal production. We need to respect that. Usually that'll be like 0.35 times your body weight, or maybe your lean body mass in grams is what we would benefit from for hormonal production. But I don't go a ton past that, because while fat is very palatable, it also is slower to digest and gets in the way of eating more often. So usually my personal approach is red meat and egg meals, no. Fish, chicken, tuna, something like that, yes, added fat source. We're going to touch on, I believe I was requested to do one other of the fat sources that I commonly use. Now, the next one will be fast food. We're using McDonald's because that's a good example. It's not something I would lean into every day. I think that would be very not cost effective. Yes, we're getting in some protein. That's all right. It's going to be a little hard on the digestion, tough on the wallet, and also would probably lend itself to that mistake in bulking of putting on weight too fast, letting bulking being synonymous with letting our health gradually slip. And it ultimately leads to this unsustainable thing where, yeah, you got wicked strong over a training cycle or two, but I get these messages from the guys I coach like, hey, I just hate how I look now. I was lying to myself before when I said I didn't care at all and I was just going to giga bulk. Now I just hate how I look. I'm a fat slob and I get winded going up the stairs. I have to spend this whole next training cycle trying my best to maintain my strength, but based on the amount of weight I have to cut, regressing. You would have been better off in a much smaller caloric surplus for all 3 training cycles in a row. I find that chronic use of fast food kind of leads us into that category. But if we're going to have a cheat meal, and I don't like the word cheat meal for for bulking. That's not really, I don't think it connotates what I want it to connotate. If we're going to have a high calorie day, let's say on Thursday you train squats, deadlifts, and leg accessories. You do a shit ton of damage to your body on that day. You're wrecked afterward, and you know it. I think that taking a high calorie day on this could definitely benefit your recovery. You know that there's an additional demand for more food here, but you're bulking and you're already eating as much clean food as you can per day. You would have to really dig deep and force feed to take a high calorie day on your normal food options, which is the case for many people. In a perfect world, yeah, our high calorie day would be those same core nutritious foods that we eat every day, but eaten in a greater quantity, and that would work very, very well and wouldn't cause gastric distress. But the problem is that a lot of people would get really into the weeds of force feeding to get down that extra clean food. So they need something that's a little bit more of a cheat meal per se, a high calorie day cheat meal. But the big thing is we don't want something that's going to absolutely destroy our stomach. So something like Taco Bell would be D tier. The macros aren't going to be great. And you're probably going to do. Basically, we want to limit stress. One of the big reasons we don't want to be digging extra deep force feeding is because we've already stressed the shit out of our body with that brutal training session of the deadlifts and the legs. We don't want to add more stress on top of that. And really digging deep force feeding is releasing a lot of additional stress hormones. So I'd rather you get something to eat that's going to be easy to eat and pleasant to eat to get up to that higher calorie day that doesn't wreck our stomach too much. Something like Taco Bell wrecks our stomach too much would be D tier. Lots of people actually digest McDonald's okay, so it wouldn't be an everyday thing, but I'm going to put it in the C tier because I could see this in a good bulking plan. If someone told me, hey Sam, I eat clean whole foods every day, but on my brutal squat day or deadlift day where I know I'm wrecked, I take a high calorie day and I take one of my standard meals and I replace that with something that's very easy for me to eat in high quantities, and I'm still getting in some solid macros. I'm getting a lot of protein. I eat 2 Big Macs. Okay, that's fine. Once a week, I don't think that's going to have this super detrimental effect on your health. And I think you might actually find that the relaxation, the enjoyment of the food is going to help get us away from that sympathetic state, from that brutal workout, back down to chilling. It's not going to wreck our stomach too bad. Hopefully we get a good night of sleep. Cool, we're good to rock and roll, and we're actually better off the next day than we would be otherwise. The problem with something like, we're just going to go put it right now, pizza wrecks most people's stomach, unfortunately. So where, yes, we got in these extra calories, yes, we got the relaxation of enjoying some good food, not having to force feed, but our stomach is wrecked. That's this extra inflammatory response. That's this extra systemic stressor when we really don't want to have extra stressors after a tough workout. So something like pizza might be tossed down into the D tier. Unfortunately, although we all like pizza. Something like rice, I'm not going to belabor this point too much. Yes, it's very low in micronutrients, but if you're trying to get your micronutrients from rice, you're screwed to begin with. It digests easier and quicker than the alternatives of brown rice and quinoa, so we're going to be able to eat more of it, and we're going to be able to source our micronutrients from all of these other options, like our protein, our fat sources, and our fruits. Digest quickly, we can turn around and eat again. It's very palatable. It's not satiating. It's a great option. I'm not gonna go on about this too much. Generally, pork as a protein source, yes, high micronutrient density. Yes, it contains creatine. So lots of the cool reasons that we like to eat beef, but most of the sources of pork that you're going to get are going to be a little bit too fatty, and we're probably going to be full for a little bit too long. So pork, we're going to throw in the C tier. The next one, white fish. If you're poor, that's going to be tilapia. If you're rich, that's going to be cod, for example. Cod being the better option as it's a good source of omega-3s. Lots of people traditionally think of fish as a cutting food because it's very low in fat, thus it's relatively low in calories. It's basically just protein. There's not a ton of micronutrients in there. It's just protein. But one thing that I got from Evan Centopani was the use of white fish in bulking. No, it's not going to give you your extra fat. No, it's not going to give you a ton of extra micronutrients, but it's very easy to eat a lot of to get in that protein macro. It's very easy to turn through white fish without getting full, where like your average person might get kind of full with 6 ounces of chicken or red meat. They might be able to eat 8 ounces of white fish relatively easily. So it's something you can mix in there, break up the monotony. Obviously, we need to pair this with a fat source. and we also need to part with a carb source, and then we probably also want to make sure we get a fruit in, especially because we're not getting many micronutrients from the meat itself, but it can be a way to break up the monotony and be relatively easy to eat. Bananas, assuming you digest them well, I know they give some people issues. I know underripe bananas actually digest slightly better for some people. So pro tip, S tier, I would say very akin to the blueberries. You could just put it down relatively easily after a meal. You could put some peanut butter or some almond butter on it if you want. Once you're full from the meal, you could put down a banana usually. High in antioxidants, high in micronutrients. Checks that box for fructose. Big fan of bananas for bulking. Definitely a favorite of mine. Now, tortillas, not the cleanest, not perfect on the digestion, but if you're just one of those guys that are like, Sam, I understand this hypothetical optimal, but I don't have the time to do this perfectly, or I just don't have the appetite yet. Well, you're going to get the appetite eventually because your ability to eat a bunch of clean food is a trainable quality. The amount of food I can churn through nowadays versus when I was 145 is quite a bit different. I was just very stubborn and I stuck with it for a long time. I developed the ability to eat more and more. But I did have to rely on some strategies earlier on in my lifting to get in those calories so that way I didn't have to wait for the ability to eat more food. And tortillas, tons of calories, don't wreck the digestion too bad, and they make a quantity of food easier to eat despite adding an extra 300 calories. So if you take the same beef and rice and you put it in 2 tortillas, it suddenly becomes easy to eat and it's added calories. So this is genuine A-tier diet hack. Really, really, really something that I benefited a lot from. Sandwiches, the bread might be a little bit slower to digest than we'd like, so we might not be able to eat again as quickly. But again, it's very convenient. You can take it with you on the go and not have to heat it up. If you're working a standard job, sandwiches are something that we can lean into a little bit. Yeah, the processed meat, yeah, blah, blah, blah. I think B is a fine place to put sandwiches. I think it's something you could lean into. It's not part of my hypothetical optimal bulking plan, but also if it's either hypothetical optimal or and you're going to adhere with a very low percentage consistency, or something that's a small step away, but excuse me, but you're going to be very consistent. I'll take the consistent one all day, which we're going to touch on in a moment. Protein shakes. Protein shakes have been largely demonized within our space because people realize you'd probably be better off eating some kind of whole food that also comes with micronutrients and is maybe a little bit easier on the stomach. Yes, that is true. If you have the choice between a shake and a real meal, I would take the real meal every time. So people say, oh, shakes suck, shakes suck. We've been scammed by the supplement industry. Yes, we have been scammed by the supplement industry, but I'd say protein powder is one of the few things that I think is very solid, and I don't think they've screwed us over on too badly. The big thing is lots of people, they're like, oh, well, I don't drink shakes because it's more optimal if I do this thing that I don't end up doing, and that's eating the extra clean meal. If option 1 is you eat 3 solid meals and that's it, and option 2 is you eat 3 solid meals and 1 shake, I'll take the second one because you're going to actually hit your protein macro consistently. If you're someone who's struggling to get that protein macro up, shakes are something I would absolutely implement on top of what you're able to consistently do. Eventually, yeah, maybe we progress that shake to be another solid food meal once you feel like you're ready for it. But if the alternative is not hitting our macros at all, that's the big comparison. Is we always talk about the comparison between if we eat the right food and a protein shake, but we never talk about the reality, which is not eating anything in the protein shake. So I think B tier. That's definitely something that we can use heavily within our early attempts at dieting. Next one, chicken, S tier. It's a protein source. It's relatively easy to eat. Yeah, it's not super dense in micronutrients, but eating beef every meal probably gets a little bit old for a lot of people. I don't know, not much to say there. I would use it in a bulking setting. I would use it in a cutting setting. There's a reason that bodybuilders love chicken. Almonds, great source of magnesium, which is relatively hard to source in the diet. Almonds, oysters, dark chocolate, and pumpkin seeds are places you can get it. Good proteins, healthy fats, and they're very convenient to throw down a handful after a meal. Or, much like we talked about with the old peanut butter and jelly sandwich, if we know that we've got this space between classes or this space after our workout walking home or whatever, this can be something we can throw in there. And unlike the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it does have a ton of other micronutrient benefits. So super convenient way to sneak in some extra calories. Let's see. Next one, we have potatoes. Potatoes are going to be a good option. Digestion is variable. Some people, they sit like a lump in their stomach and they can't eat again very soon, in which case I would always favor towards rice. They're a little higher in satiety compared to the rice. I'm going to include my usual disclaimer. People say, oh, what about the glycemic index? I believe the American Diabetic Association has disavowed the glycemic index because the glycemic index assumes you're only eating that carbohydrate alone, which isn't really what happens in real life. So yes, rice would instantly be like, oh, like here's the glycemic index, but we're not just eating a bowl of white rice and nothing else. We have a protein source and a fat source, which slows down the digestion as if it were a complex carbohydrate source. So I don't really factor glycemic index into many of my decisions. Potatoes being a great source of potassium, good way to mix up your carb sources. Yeah, they sit heavy in the stomach for some people, but for some people, they find they could just eat a shit ton of potatoes where they would burn out on rice. I would say they're A tier, but I could probably be talked into bumping them down to B tier because of the higher satiety and gastric distress they cause some people. Oranges, easy to eat, tasty, S tier. Same reasons we've talked about with the bananas and the blueberries. Beans, they don't need to be baked beans. This was just the first image that came up. Gastric distress is going to be a bit of an issue here. It could be a great way to change up the flavor profile of a meal, fit in some extra calories, fit in some extra carbs and proteins. But due to the gastric distress, I have to put them C tier. Some people tolerate them well, in which case that can be your little secret weapon to add calories to a meal and make it more enjoyable. But I'm going to put them C tier for most people. Fruit juice. This is a standard trick to fit in more calories. Many people say, oh, if you can't eat enough calories, use liquid calories. Again, if the alternative is just not getting in the calories, this can kind of be in the same category as the peanut butter jelly sandwiches, which is it's convenient and it can let us fit in extra calories where we wouldn't otherwise get them. So, but the problem with many fruit juices is that they will cause acid reflux if drank in high quantities. That being said, I would say things like cranberry juice contains iodine and antioxidants. So we're getting other micronutrients, and it can be a very easy way to get that serving of fruit after our meals. So a small glass of juice is something I'll often do to make it even easier to get down that serving of fruit and those extra calories. I just wouldn't drink it in huge quantities due to that common acid reflux that might happen. But things like cranberry juice in place of, let's say, after one of my meals, if I don't even have the room to eat a banana or an orange, something like cranberry juice could be quite high. Same thing with orange juice. Again, it's just if we're bulking and we need to lean into these liquid calories, I would love if the liquid calories had something else to offer you, which some fruit juices do, some fruit juices don't really. Things like orange juice and cranberry juice at least do have something else to offer you. Corn, not enough extra calories, not enough micronutrients comparatively to other vegetables. Takes up a lot of room in the stomach. Not great for digestion. I mean, that's not terrible for you. So I'll probably put you in the C tier. Spinach. We should probably be eating veggies with each meal. Even if it's not a huge quantity, checking that box, getting in our fiber is going to be a big part of our efforts to keep our digestion good and keep our health good while in this prolonged caloric surplus. Spinach cooks down to be very small in volume, which is great because we want that volume being taken up by stuff with higher higher caloric density. And it also is extremely dense in the micronutrients. So this is probably one of the best ways we can check that veggie box is cooking some spinach and throwing it in there. Doesn't take up too much room in the stomach. Checks that veggie box and also contains tons of good shit. Next one, red meat. Presumably lean. Again, we're trying to keep our fat intake moderate to low. That way we can eat more often. And that's the general approach I take. You've heard me talk many times about the benefits of red meat with the high caloric density and natural creatine content. S tier, don't need to belabor that point. Oatmeal, big benefit. Big benefit to oatmeal is that it lends itself to these alternate flavorings like we talked about with the cream of rice, but I would say it's outperformed by the cream of rice in that it takes a bit longer to digest oatmeal in our efforts to eat frequently. Usually cream of rice would lend itself to that same flavor profile, go with the same protein source, but would just digest quicker. It's not the end of the world. Some people digest it just fine pretty quickly, but I would say that usually it's just outperformed by cream of rice. So we're going to put it at the C tier, although if it works for you, you could easily say, oh, well, in my personal list, I bump it up, and I would be totally fine with that. The next one we're going to do, these two kind of go together. One is the homemade bulking shake. You know, the standard stuff that we've all tried. Something like you get a blender, you pour some milk into it, you throw a banana in there, you throw some peanut butter in there, maybe you throw some spinach in there, some protein powder, some honey, some berries, whatever else you think of for your personal bulking concoction. Again, this is something that we might utilize early in our bulking journey while we really haven't trained with consistency our ability to put down food. I would very much prefer, just based on general gastric distress, that you eventually replace this with whole foods, but it's something that we want to utilize early. It contains a bunch of micronutrients from the things that we throw in there. It is ultimately whole foods blended up. I find generally liquid calories are going to upset your stomach a little bit in huge quantities, so you have to kind of respect that. But this is something that I used early in my bulking journey. I fiddle with my own recipe. You can fiddle with your own recipe. Low B tier. It's not something that we keep in there forever generally, but it can get you that extra food down as you are training your ability to eat often and eat a little bit more and a little bit more food. Just like we wouldn't jump into trying to bench 400 pounds, we probably shouldn't jump straight into trying to eat 4,000 clean calories. We just work our way up there, and we can use some of these things to supplement in the meantime. Ben & Jerry's, ice cream in general, I would say it's got the same pros as pizza. We could take it on a high-calorie day. I wouldn't do it on a daily basis. But cons is that it's usually going to come with gastric distress. Kind of the same thing we talked about with the fast food. I could see this on a once-a-week basis. I would probably prefer the fast food for the higher amount of protein we're getting, so it's going to be a little bit more macro-wise, similar to what we would already be eating. Yeah, as much as I love to eat a pint of Ben & Jerry's for my high day, I would say it's outperformed by the getting fast food option, or in a perfect world, you go and get something better than fast food. But I would say the same criticisms I made of pizza are going to have to be made of ice cream. Yes, I could see it on a once-a-week basis, but the gastric distress probably makes it not the best option for our high day. Steak, you're going to have to be wary of what cut you get and the fat content to keep with our goal of keeping our fat moderate, but steak's going to be a great option. Hard to chew through a lot of steak per day. It's why a lot of people lean into the ground beef. We can get the standardized leanness of it of 93.7 or whatever your grocery store sells, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, don't need to really beat that dead horse anymore. Kimchi, so fermented foods, I would say, yeah, they can help with our digestion. The inclusion of fermented foods is a well-documented benefit, although it can be overdone. You can get like bacterial overgrowths in your stomach. There's, maintaining your stomach health is a fine line. Some of the things that are good can be done in excess and they become bad. A good thing done in excess no longer is much of a good thing, and the same thing very much applies to fermented foods. You could probably make an argument that this could be A tier or B tier. We're just going to throw it in the B tier. We're probably going to include other fermented foods here off the top of my head. Things like, I don't know what's fermented. Kimchi, sauerkraut, real like fermented style pickles. You can tell if your sauerkraut or your pickles are actually the kind that are going to have live cultures based on whether they're kept in the refrigerated section of your grocery store or not. But I would say those are B. Some people probably would easily argue those into the A tier, and I probably wouldn't try to argue against them. Next one is whole milk. Kind of run into similar issues that we talked about with the yogurt. I'm going to kind of categorize it the same way as the yogurt. Tons of people can't handle it. If you can handle it, it's a great way to fit in some extra calories after you kind of finished your ability to eat a meal. Tons of micronutrients between the calcium and the potassium. Very similar overall to the yogurt, maybe without the prebiotic effects. So it'd probably be lower in the B tier than the yogurt in some ways, but it's extremely convenient. So we'll just go B tier. If you tolerate milk really well, absolutely bumps up into the A tier. Something like salmon, a little hard on the wallet. Good micronutrient density, good omega-3s, great source, just not easy on the wallet. If you can afford it, awesome. You can source like wild-caught salmon well. More power to you. I'm jealous of you. We'll go A tier. Olive oil, as far as added fat sources, I would say it's right up there with the avocado oil or the avocados or avocado oil. If we have a meal that we need to add fat, avocado and olive oil are kind of my go-to options. So A tier easily could make the argument into S tier. Ribs, bit high in fat, kind of same criticism we made of the pork. Peanut butter, we're also going to pair this with other nut butters, including almond butter, which is probably a little bit more nutritious, or mixed nut butter like they sell at Costco, which, by the way, is delicious. It's got chia seeds mixed in. It's a very healthful fat, and it tastes even better than peanut butter. As far as an added fat source, depends on the flavor profile. So something like our cream of rice, where we might not want to add avocado or olive oil, this comes in clutch. I really like the almond butter. I think almond butter and mixed nut butter, easily A or S tier. Peanut butter, probably B tier, just because I feel like it's outperformed by the other nut butters. Sourdough bread, I believe sourdough is prebiotic based on the fermentation, but I could be wrong there. Tends to digest a little bit better for some people than other types of bread, like whole grain breads. Something I could see being used. Not a lot to say there. Probably sourdough is what I would probably make the aforementioned sandwich in B tier on if I were to choose myself. Now, mass gain shakes. We talked about the homemade mass gain shake. We're talking about the powder big tins. These are going to have all of the cons that the big shake has without some of the pluses. We don't get the other micronutrients from the homemade shake. All around, these are going to be outperformed by making your own with a banana and rice, and not rice, cream of rice, honey, protein powder, milk, or a milk substitute. You're going to get all these extra micronutrients on it. It's not going to be any harder on the stomach than the big tub will be. All around, I would say these are outperformed and not a great option when compared to making your own mass gain shake. And it doesn't really take any extra time, and it's no real harder to drink. Sushi, there's a reason all these bodybuilders, when they take their high-calorie day, they go get sushi. Because, again, if we're taking a high-calorie day in a perfect world, we eat the same foods we're normally eating, just in higher quantities. And sushi, especially if we get the one, I think it's sashimi, that is basically what we're already eating, just in high quantities. That's really easy to eat. So this is, let's say, the lower tier high-calorie day options. Yeah, you could have a pint of Ben & Jerry's. Yeah, you could have a pizza. Maybe going to McDonald's might be outperforming that a little bit because you're getting protein, but still a little hard on the stomach. Well, we gotta put the sushi up in B tier, because yeah, it's as far as the options go, really not wallet friendly, but there's a reason lots of people do it. Second to last one, dried fruits. For all the reasons we talked about with the almonds, it's an easy way to sneak in calories that you can just throw in a baggie on your way to school, on your way to work, fit in calories where we aren't otherwise getting them. Great option for fitting in that in, while also getting some other benefits. Super easy to eat. I used to eat dried fruit while I trained for a long time. And then a chicken quesadilla. This is one of those ones where this was something I leaned into and I was really struggling to get enough calories. Like we talked about with the tortilla, this was something I did use, although the cheese probably makes it a little harder to digest, but it's a very easy way to eat some chicken quesadillas, get in that protein macro. That's been the video. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you boys.